Before sleep arrives, it helps to remember that humans have always searched for calm in the natural world. Long before shelves of labelled bottles, long before laboratories and clinical trials, healing lived in landscapes. It lived in leaves, in bark, in roots, and in the quiet observation of how the body responded over time. People watched carefully. They noticed which plants softened pain, which eased restlessness, and which helped the mind settle after long days. These were not guesses made in a moment, but patterns recognized slowly, repeated across seasons and generations. Welcome to AstraFlow. Here, science drifts like starlight, and curiosity becomes calm. Tonight, let your thoughts slow down, your breathing soften, and your mind settle into quiet understanding. If you're listening from somewhere peaceful, a bedroom, a quiet bus ride, or a dimly lit room at the end of the day, you're welcome to share that below. A simple like or subscription helps this space reach others who may also be winding down. But for now, there's nothing you need to do. Just listen and allow the pace to remain gentle. Now let's begin and explore the science of the most relaxing herbal remedy facts for falling asleep. Herbal remedies are often described as traditions, comforts, or old practices passed down without explanation. But in reality, they represent the earliest form of medical experimentation. Long before people had names for neurotransmitters, hormones, or receptors, they had bodies that reacted predictably to certain substances. A leaf brewed into water produced calm. A root chewed before rest softened tension. Over time, these effects became familiar, then reliable. What makes this history important is not nostalgia, but method. Early herbal knowledge was built through observation and consequence. If a plant caused harm, that memory stayed. If it helped repeatedly, it was remembered, shared, and refined. Healing knowledge became a kind of living library, carried by communities rather than written institutions. This process demanded patience. Effects were noticed over days, weeks, or years, not minutes. And because mistakes carried real risks, restraint became part of the practice. This slow accumulation of understanding shaped how herbs were used for rest and sleep. Rather than forcing unconsciousness, many calming plants worked indirectly. They eased agitation, they reduced mental noise, they helped the body transition from alertness to rest. Sleep was not commanded, it was invited. This distinction matters. Even today, some of the most studied sleep-supporting herbs do not sedate the brain. Instead, they influence systems related to relaxation, stress response, and nervous system balance. They create conditions where sleep becomes more likely, rather than overwhelming the body into shutdown. This approach aligns closely with how natural sleep works, gradually, gently, and in response to safety and calm. As we move through this exploration together, you may notice a recurring theme. Herbal remedies rarely act like switches. They act more like slow changes in weather. The mind becomes quieter, the body feels less tense, thoughts lose urgency. These shifts are subtle, but meaningful, and they mirror the way sleep itself usually arrives when conditions are right. You don't need to memorize names or remember every detail tonight. Let the information pass through lightly. Think of it as understanding rather than effort. These ideas are here to support rest, not interrupt it. In the sections ahead, we'll look at how herbs interact with the nervous system, why preparation and timing matter, and how science continues to study what people once learned simply by paying attention. For now, stay comfortable. Let your breathing remain unhurried, and allow this quiet journey into herbal science to continue at its own pace. When we think about experiments today, we often imagine controlled rooms, instruments, and written protocols. But long before any of that existed, humans were already experimenting in a quieter way. The first experiments happened through daily life. People ate plants, brewed them, applied them, and noticed how their bodies responded. Over time, patterns emerged. Certain leaves reliably eased discomfort. Certain roots consistently slowed the body and encouraged rest. These observations formed the earliest framework of medicine. What made these early experiments different from modern ones was their pace. Nothing happened quickly. Effects were observed over long periods, sometimes across many uses. If a plant helped someone sleep once, that meant little. If it helped repeatedly, across different people and seasons, it became noteworthy. This repetition is what transformed chance into knowledge. The body became the measuring tool, and time became the method. Unlike modern drugs, most herbal remedies did not aim for dramatic or immediate results. Their effects were often mild, layered, and cumulative. This was especially true for plants associated with calm and sleep. Rather than forcing the body into unconsciousness, they tended to soften the edges of alertness. Muscles relaxed slightly, breathing slowed, thoughts became less sharp. These changes were small enough to feel safe, yet consistent enough to be trusted. Early communities learned that this subtlety was not a weakness. In fact, it was often safer. A remedy that worked slowly allowed room for adjustment. If something felt too strong, it could be reduced or stopped. This is how dosing logic developed long before measurements existed. Phrases like "a small handful," "a short steep," or "only at night" were not poetic. They were practical boundaries shaped by experience. Sleep-supporting herbs were often used within routines rather than as single interventions. A tea taken each evening, a scent released before rest, a preparation paired with warmth, darkness, and quiet. Over time, the body learned to associate these signals with slowing down. This conditioning mattered. The herb was part of a broader system that told the nervous system it was safe to rest. These early experiments also taught an important lesson that still applies today. Effects varied between people. One person might feel calm quickly, while another noticed very little. This variability was accepted rather than denied. It reinforced the idea that herbs were not universal solutions, but tools that interacted with individual bodies. That understanding reduced pressure and expectation, which paradoxically made relaxation easier. From a modern perspective, these early practices resemble long-term observational studies without written data. The difference is that the outcomes were lived rather than recorded. Knowledge survived because it worked often enough to be useful and gentle enough to be sustainable. Plants that caused harm without benefit were abandoned. Those that offered reliable support remained. This long process shaped how humans approach sleep itself. Sleep was seen as something that emerges when the body feels supported, not something that can be forced. Herbal remedies fit naturally into this view. They did not demand rest. They prepared the ground for it. As we continue, you'll notice that modern science often confirms what these early experiments suggested. Many calming herbs influence stress signaling, nervous system balance, or sleep readiness rather than acting as sedatives. The language has changed, but the pattern remains familiar. For now, let this idea settle. Healing and rest did not begin with control. They began with attention, patience, and the willingness to notice small changes over time. Before there were explanations, there was attention. Early herbal knowledge did not begin with theories about the body or abstract ideas about chemistry. It began with noticing. People paid close attention to what happened after they consumed a plant, inhaled its scent, or used it before rest. They noticed timing. They noticed intensity. They noticed whether sleep arrived more easily or whether the body remained restless. This kind of observation required a different mindset from modern problem solving. There was no expectation of immediate answers. Effects were allowed to unfold naturally. If a plant helped calm the body one night, that was interesting. If it did so repeatedly, over many evenings, it became meaningful. Knowledge was built slowly, through patterns that appeared only when patience was present. Because sleep is a daily experience, it became one of the clearest ways to observe subtle effects. People knew what it felt like to fall asleep easily and what it felt like to lie awake. When a plant shifted that experience even slightly, the change was noticeable. A quieter mind, a smoother transition into rest, fewer awakenings during the night. These outcomes did not require explanation to be recognized. They were felt directly. This process also taught caution. Not every calming sensation was beneficial. Some plants caused heaviness without rest. Others produced drowsiness followed by discomfort. Over time, these differences mattered. Plants that supported natural sleep rhythms were favoured over those that disrupted them. The goal was not unconsciousness, but restoration. Without formal theory, early practitioners still developed principles. They learned that timing mattered. A calming herb taken too early might dull energy unnecessarily. Taken too late, it might interfere with the natural onset of sleep. They learned that preparation mattered. The same plant could feel gentle as a tea and overwhelming as a concentrated form. These insights were practical, not philosophical. What's important to understand is that this observational approach created boundaries. People learned when to use certain plants and when to avoid them. Sleep herbs were often reserved for evening use, paired with darkness and quiet. This reinforced the body's internal rhythms rather than working against them. In effect, herbal practice supported the circadian system long before that term existed. Modern science now describes these processes with different language. We talk about nervous system tone, stress hormones, and neurotransmitter balance. But the core observations remain the same. Many herbs associated with sleep do not act directly on sleep centers. Instead, they reduce signals that keep the body alert. They soften arousal. They allow the body's natural sleep mechanisms to do their work. This explains why herbal effects can feel gentle or even subtle. They are not designed to override the body. They are designed to support it. In a culture accustomed to fast results, this subtlety can be misunderstood. But for sleep, it is often an advantage. Sudden changes can be disruptive. Gradual shifts are more likely to align with the body's own rhythms. Observation before theory also encouraged humility. Early users did not assume they understood why something worked. They simply noticed that it did. This openness allowed knowledge to evolve rather than harden into rigid beliefs. If a plant stopped helping, its use changed. If a preparation felt too strong, it was adjusted. Sleep support remained flexible and responsive. As you listen, you may notice that this approach mirrors what helps sleep arrive now. There is no need to analyze every sensation. Simply noticing when the body begins to relax is often enough. Attention without pressure creates space for rest. In the sections ahead, we'll continue to explore how this quiet observational tradition shaped the way herbs support calm and sleep, and how modern science has begun to explain what was once known only through experience. It is easy to imagine early herbal practices as guesswork, but that picture is misleading. Folk medicine was rarely random. It was shaped by repetition, consequence, and memory. Plants did not earn their place in daily use because they were available or symbolic. They earned it because they produced outcomes that people could feel and recognize. For sleep and calm, this selectivity mattered greatly. Nighttime is when the body is most sensitive to disruption. If a plant caused agitation, strange dreams, discomfort, or restless sleep, those effects were remembered quickly. People depend on sleep for survival. Remedies that interfered with it were not tolerated for long. Over time, only plants that supported rest without creating new problems remained part of the tradition. This filtering process happened quietly. No one announced which herbs were approved or rejected. The knowledge spread through shared experience. Someone mentioned sleeping more easily after an evening tea. Another tried the same plant and noticed a similar effect. Over months and years, confidence grew. The plant became associated with calm, not because of belief, but because of consistency. What made folk medicine particularly effective was its attention to patterns rather than single events. A remedy was not judged by one night of good sleep. It was judged by whether it helped most of the time without causing harm. This emphasis on reliability mirrors how modern medicine evaluates treatments today, even if the language and tools differ. There was also an understanding that sleep is not isolated from the rest of life. Remedies were chosen with context in mind. A plant that felt calming after physical labour might feel different after emotional stress. Some herbs were reserved for periods of worry or grief. Others were used as part of daily routine. This flexibility prevented overuse and reduced disappointment. Folk practices also recognised that combinations mattered. A calming plant might be paired with warmth, quiet, and darkness. The remedy was not just the herb itself, but the environment surrounding it. This created a layered effect where multiple signals told the nervous system it was safe to slow down. Modern sleep science now recognises the importance of these cues, but the principle existed long before formal research. Importantly, folk medicine allowed for individual differences. If a plant helped many people but not everyone, that was accepted. There was no expectation of universality. Sleep, after all, has always been personal. Some people fall asleep easily, others struggle. Herbal support was seen as an aid, not a guarantee. This approach also prevented escalation. When a gentle remedy was enough, there was no push to make it stronger. Potency was respected but not pursued unnecessarily. This restraint reduced side effects and preserved trust in the practice. A plant that helped softly was often preferred over one that acted forcefully. From a modern viewpoint, this looks like an early form of risk management. Harm was minimised not through rules, but through collective memory. Remedies that caused problems faded away. Those that fit naturally into daily life endured. As we continue, keep this idea in mind. The herbs that remain associated with sleep today are not survivors by accident. They persisted because they aligned well with the body's need for gentle transition, rather than abrupt change. Let that thought rest with you. Calm that lasts is usually built slowly, through consistency rather than force. As human knowledge became more formalised, the quiet observations of herbal practice did not disappear. Instead, many of them became the starting point for modern medicine. When scientists began isolating and studying compounds, they often looked first to plants that had been used reliably for generations. This was not romanticism. It was efficiency. If a remedy kept appearing across cultures and time, it suggested something real was happening in the body. For sleep and calm, this bridge is especially clear. Long before the language of neurotransmitters and receptors existed, people knew which plants softened restlessness and eased the transition into sleep. When researchers later examined these plants, they frequently found compounds that influenced nervous system signaling stress hormones or brain activity associated with relaxation. The ancient experience and the modern explanation began to align. This process did not replace herbal knowledge, it translated it. A leaf brewed in water became a compound measured in milligrams. A scent inhaled before bed became a molecule traced through neural pathways. The plant itself did not change. What changed was the depth of understanding. The effect people noticed remained the same. Many widely used medicines illustrate this continuity. Pain relief, heart support, infection control, and sleep-related treatments all have roots in plant observation. The difference is not that modern medicine abandoned nature, but that it learned how to refine and standardize what nature offered. This refinement improved consistency and safety, but it did not erase the original source. For sleep support, modern research often confirms something early users already understood intuitively. Gentle is better. Compounds that reduce excessive alertness without suppressing consciousness tend to support healthier sleep patterns. This explains why some modern sleep medications aim to quiet arousal systems rather than force sedation. The principle is old. The tools are new. The bridge between folk practice and science also reveals limits. Not every traditional remedy survives scrutiny. Some plants that were once used casually were later found to carry risks. Others worked only in specific forms or doses. This filtering is part of progress, not contradiction. It reflects the same process that shaped folk medicine, now applied with more precise instruments. What remains consistent is respect for the body's rhythms. Whether through a warm tea or a measured capsule, effective sleep support tends to align with natural processes. It reduces interference rather than adding pressure. It works with the nervous system instead of overpowering it. As you listen, notice how familiar this idea feels. Sleep itself cannot be forced. It emerges when conditions allow. Herbal remedies that have endured are those that understand this quietly, offering support rather than control. In the sections ahead, we'll look more closely at specific examples of how plants influenced modern treatments and how that knowledge continues to shape our understanding of calm and rest today. For now, let your attention remain light. There is nothing to solve, just follow the steady movement of ideas, the same way sleep follows the steady slowing of the body. One of the clearest examples of the bridge between herbal observation and modern medicine begins with a simple tree. Willow grows quietly near water, its branches flexible, its bark unremarkable at first glance. Yet for thousands of years, people noticed something consistent about it. Chewing willow bark eased pain. It softened fevers. It reduced the sharp discomfort that made rest difficult. This knowledge appeared independently in different parts of the world. Wherever willow trees grew, that repetition matters. It suggests that the effect was not accidental or cultural, but biological. Bodies responded in similar ways, even when people had no contact with one another. Long before anyone knew the word compound, the pattern was already clear. Centuries later, scientists began asking why. They isolated substances in willow bark known as salicylates, chemicals that influence pain signaling and inflammation in the body. These compounds became the foundation for aspirin, one of the most widely used medicines in history. The transformation from bark to tablet was a change in form, not in principle. What makes this story especially relevant for sleep is not pain relief itself, but what it teaches about gentleness and timing. Willow bark did not act instantly or aggressively. Its effects were noticeable but gradual. It eased discomfort enough for the body to settle, rather than overwhelming sensation entirely. This allowed rest to emerge naturally once pain was softened. Modern aspirin is more potent and predictable, but it also requires clearer boundaries. The same chemistry that reduces pain can increase bleeding risk or irritate the stomach when used carelessly. In this way, modern science echoed an ancient lesson. Strength demands respect. Dose and context matter. The willow story reminds us that the body does not distinguish between natural and synthetic. It responds to chemistry. What matters is how that chemistry interacts with existing systems. When used appropriately, the result is relief. When misused, problems arise. This truth applies equally to herbs and modern drugs. For sleep, this example reinforces an important idea. Effective support often begins by reducing obstacles rather than creating force. Pain, discomfort, and inflammation keep the body alert. When those signals are softened, rest becomes possible. The willow did not create sleep. It removed what was preventing it. As you listen, you may notice how often this pattern appears. Herbs that support sleep rarely act directly on sleep itself. They work upstream, easing tension, discomfort, or mental noise. This indirect approach aligns with how the body naturally transitions into rest. Let this example settle gently. A quiet tree near water helped shape modern medicine, not through urgency, but through consistency and careful observation. In the same way, calm arrives most easily when it is allowed to build gradually, without pressure or force. It can be comforting to imagine plants as gentle allies designed to help us, but that idea isn't quite accurate. Plants do not intend to heal humans. They do not grow leaves or roots for our benefit. Instead, they produce chemistry for their own survival. They defend themselves against insects, fungi, and grazing animals. They seal wounds, They communicate stress, and in doing so they create compounds that happen to interact with human biology in useful ways. This accidental alignment is one of the most fascinating aspects of herbal remedies. A bitter taste that discourages an insect may reduce inflammation in a human body. An aromatic oil that repels pests may calm the nervous system when inhaled. These effects were not planned. They emerged through millions of years of evolution shaped by environmental pressure rather than medical goals. Understanding this helps explain why herbal remedies can feel both gentle and powerful. A plant's chemistry was not designed to be mild. It was designed to work. When that chemistry enters the human body, the result depends on dose, preparation, and timing. In small amounts, certain compounds may support calm and relaxation. In larger amounts, the same compounds can overwhelm the system. This is why early herbal traditions developed respect rather than blind trust. People learned quickly that natural substances could cause harm as well as benefit. A plant that soothed one problem could aggravate another. This awareness led to careful use, especially with remedies taken before sleep. Nighttime is when the body is vulnerable. Anything that disrupted rest was noticed. Modern science reinforces this view. When researchers study plant compounds, they often find that their effects are dose-dependent and context-specific. The same molecule can produce different outcomes depending on how it is absorbed and what else is present in the body. This variability is not a flaw. It is a reflection of living chemistry interacting with living systems. For sleep, this perspective encourages moderation. Herbs that support rest are most effective when they reduce excess alertness without suppressing awareness entirely. They work best when they create conditions for sleep, not when they attempt to replace it. This mirrors how the body naturally behaves as night deepens. Recognizing that plants do not intend to heal also removes unnecessary expectations. There is no promise embedded in a leaf or flower. There is only potential. When used thoughtfully, that potential can support calm, ease tension, and encourage rest. When used carelessly, it can disrupt the very balance it was meant to help. As you continue listening, let this idea soften your thinking. Sleep, like herbal support, is not a transaction. It is a response. When the environment feels safe and signals of alertness fade, rest arrives on its own. In the next section, we'll look more closely at a common misunderstanding that grows from forgetting this truth: the belief that natural substances are automatically gentle. One of the most persistent misunderstandings about herbal remedies is the idea that natural automatically means mild or harmless. This belief is understandable. Plants grow quietly. They look familiar. Many are used as foods or teas. But nature does not produce chemistry with human comfort in mind. It produces chemistry that works. A substance can come from a leaf and still have a strong effect on the body. It can calm in one amount and overwhelm in another. It can support rest when used occasionally and disrupt balance when used too often. These outcomes are not contradictions. They are the normal behavior of active compounds interacting with living systems. Traditional herbal practices understood this long before modern warnings and labels existed. That understanding did not always appear as numbers or measurements. It appeared as rules of thumb, stories, and boundaries. Certain plants were used only at night. Others were avoided during specific life stages. Some were taken for short periods and then stopped. These guidelines emerged because people noticed what happened when limits were ignored. For sleep-supporting herbs, this awareness was especially important. The goal was never to overwhelm the nervous system. Heavy sedation may produce unconsciousness, but it does not always produce restorative sleep. Early practitioners learned that too much of a calming plant could leave the body feeling dull, uneasy, or strangely restless. In those cases, less was often better. Modern science now describes this with clearer language. Many plant compounds influence the nervous system by adjusting signaling pathways rather than shutting them down. When those pathways are pushed too far, the system can respond unpredictably. This might show up as vivid dreams, morning grogginess, or difficulty staying asleep. These effects are signals, not failures. They indicate that balance has shifted too far in one direction. Understanding that natural does not mean gentle encourages a more respectful approach. Herbs are not decorations, they are active materials. Their value lies not in their origin, but in how thoughtfully they are used. When taken with awareness, they can support calm without disruption. When taken carelessly, they can add noise to a system that is already tired. This perspective also reduces pressure. There is no need to chase stronger effects. If a small amount supports relaxation, that is enough. Sleep does not improve when the body is pushed harder. It improves when unnecessary signals are removed. As you listen, notice how this idea aligns with your own experience. The most restful nights often follow gentle evenings, not dramatic interventions. The lights dim gradually, the pace slows, the body is given time to shift. In the next section, we'll explore how this principle leads naturally to another important truth, that dose, timing, and preparation shape herbal effects more than the plant name itself. If there is one lesson that appears again and again in the history of herbal remedies, it is this: dose changes everything. The same plant can soothe or disturb, support or overwhelm, depending on how much is used, how it is prepared, and when it is taken. This understanding didn't emerge from theory, it emerged from consequence. Early herbal traditions learned quickly that more was not always better. A small amount of a calming herb might ease tension and invite rest. A larger amount of the same plant could leave the body feeling heavy, unsettled, or strangely alert. These differences were impossible to ignore, especially at night, when the goal was sleep rather than stimulation. Without scales or standardized measurements, people developed practical ways to regulate dose. They paid attention to taste, strength, and timing. A mild tea might be used daily. A stronger preparation might be reserved for rare nights of restlessness. Short steeps and long steeps produce different effects, even from the same plant. Over time, these distinctions became part of the knowledge itself. For sleep support, dose sensitivity matters because the nervous system is finely balanced. Small shifts in signaling can tip the body toward rest. Larger shifts can create resistance. This is why many herbs associated with sleep do not behave like sedatives. They work within narrow ranges where the body responds smoothly. Outside those ranges, the effect can feel wrong. Modern research confirms this pattern. Many plant compounds show what scientists call a biphasic effect. At lower doses, they may reduce anxiety or quiet mental activity. At higher doses, they can produce the opposite response. This is not a flaw. It is a reminder that biological systems prefer moderation. Understanding dose also encourages patience. Herbs that work gently may not announce themselves loudly. Their effects are often noticed in the absence of struggle rather than the presence of sensation. Falling asleep a little more easily, waking less often, feeling less tense in the evening. These are signs of alignment, not intensity. This perspective can be especially comforting if you have ever tried something that felt too strong. It does not mean the plant was wrong for you. It may simply mean the amount, timing, or form was mismatched. In herbal practice, adjustment is part of the process. As you continue listening, let this idea remain simple. Support for sleep does not come from force, it comes from fitting gently into the body's existing rhythms. When dose is right, the nervous system does not have to react. It can simply slow down. In the next section, we'll look at how this principle leads naturally to respect, not fear, but awareness, and how strength in herbal remedies is defined by interaction, not by origin. When people talk about strength in remedies, they often think about where something comes from. Natural is assumed to be mild, synthetic is assumed to be powerful, but the body does not recognize those categories, it responds only to interaction. Chemistry meets biology, and an effect follows. The source of that chemistry matters far less than how it behaves once it enters the system. This is why a compound extracted from a plant can influence the body just as strongly as one created in a laboratory. In both cases, molecules bind to receptors, alter signaling, and change how systems communicate. The difference is not in origin, but in precision, predictability, and context. A leaf and a tablet can act on the same pathway. What changes is how consistently and how intensely they do so. Early herbal practice understood this intuitively. People did not trust a plant simply because it was natural. They trusted it because they had seen how it interacted with the body over time. If a plant reliably supported calm without causing harm, it earned its place. If it disrupted sleep or produced unwanted effects, it was avoided, regardless of how familiar it seemed. This focus on interaction also explains why preparation matters so much. A tea, a tincture, and a capsule made from the same plant can behave very differently. Each form changes how quickly compounds enter the bloodstream, how long they last, and which systems they influence first. The plant remains the same, the interaction changes. For sleep, this distinction is especially important. Strong effects are not always helpful at night. A remedy that acts too quickly or too intensely can jolt the nervous system rather than soothe it. Gentler interactions often align better with the body's natural slowing. They allow alertness to fade without creating resistance. Modern sleep science reflects this idea. Many effective sleep supports do not act directly on sleep centers in the brain. Instead, they reduce signals that keep the body alert. They lower stress response, ease muscle tension, or quiet mental noise. These indirect effects can feel subtle, but they're often more sustainable. Understanding strength as interaction, rather than origin, also removes unnecessary fear. A plant does not become dangerous simply because it is potent. It becomes risky when its interaction with the body is misunderstood or ignored. Awareness creates safety. Attention creates balance. As you listen, notice how this reframes the idea of support. The goal is not to overpower the body into rest. The goal is to create interactions that allow rest to emerge naturally. Sleep responds best to cooperation, not force. In the next section, we'll look at a plant that illustrates this principle clearly, one that demanded precision and restraint from the very beginning, teaching respect through its power. Among the many plants that shaped early medicine, foxglove stands out because it allowed no casual use. Tall, elegant, and quietly striking, it attracted attention not only for its appearance, but for its powerful effects on the body. Early healers noticed that foxglove could influence the heartbeat. In some cases, it seemed to strengthen weak pulses. In others, it caused harm. This dual nature made the plant impossible to ignore. What foxglove taught very early was the importance of precision. Small amounts could support the heart. Slightly larger amounts could overwhelm it. There was little room for error. This forced restraint long before modern measurements existed. Healers learned to approach the plant with care, attention, and humility. Foxglove was not used because it was natural. It was used because it worked, and only when handled carefully. Centuries later, this knowledge guided the development of digitalis-based heart medications. Scientists isolated the compounds responsible for foxglove's effects and learned how to control them with exact dosing. The plant itself did not become safer. Our understanding became more precise. Modern medicine inherited both the benefit and the caution embedded in the original observation. Although foxglove is not a sleep remedy, its lesson applies directly to sleep-supporting herbs. It reminds us that effectiveness and risk are often linked. A substance strong enough to change physiology deserves respect, regardless of its source. Sleep herbs may act more gently, but they still influence real systems. They still require thoughtful use. Foxglove also illustrates why early herbal traditions valued balance over intensity. Remedies that demanded strict control were reserved for serious conditions. For everyday needs like rest and calm, gentler plants were preferred. These allowed room for error and adaptation. They supported the body without demanding constant vigilance. As you continue listening, let this story settle as a reminder. Strength is not something to chase blindly. In the context of sleep, the most valuable support is often the kind that works quietly, predictably, and within narrow, comfortable boundaries. In the next section, we'll return to a broader view, looking at how herbal knowledge emerged not from individuals, but from long collective experience carried across generations. Herbal medicine did not emerge from sudden insight or individual brilliance. It grew as a form of long-term memory shared across generations. No single person discovered most remedies. Instead, knowledge accumulated slowly, shaped by countless small decisions made by people paying attention to their bodies and environments over time. Someone tried a leaf and noticed relief. Someone else adjusted the amount after feeling discomfort. Another person changed the preparation when the effect felt too strong or too weak. These small refinements added up. Over years and decades, ineffective or dangerous options faded away, while helpful practices remained. What survived was not perfection, but reliability. This process depended on honesty. Exaggeration could be harmful. Claiming a remedy worked when it did not might cost someone a night of sleep or more. Communities learned to value accuracy over optimism. A plant did not need to be impressive, it needed to be dependable, especially when it came to sleep, where disruption was felt immediately and remembered clearly. Sleep-related herbal knowledge was often preserved through routine rather than instruction. Evening teas, familiar scents, and repeated gestures taught the body what to expect. Children observed adults winding down in similar ways each night. Over time, these patterns became part of cultural memory. Calm was not explained, it was demonstrated. In some traditions, cautionary knowledge was embedded into stories or rituals. Certain plants were associated with warnings, others were reserved for specific seasons or life stages. These narratives served a practical purpose. They helped ensure that information survived even when formal teaching was limited. Memory became the container for safety. From a modern perspective, this looks like research conducted without laboratories. Instead of written data, there was lived experience. Instead of controlled trials, there was repetition. Instead of statistics, there was trust built slowly over time. While imperfect, this system was surprisingly effective at identifying what works gently and consistently. This long memory also allowed flexibility. If conditions changed, practices could change with them. A plant used heavily in one climate might be less relevant in another. Sleep patterns varied with daylight, workload, and season. Herbal support adapted accordingly. There was no expectation of permanence. Use was responsive rather than fixed. Modern science now revisits many of these long-held practices, testing them with precise tools. Sometimes the results confirm traditional use. Sometimes they refine it. Sometimes they challenge it. This dialogue between past and present is not a conflict. It is a continuation of the same process, observing, adjusting, and learning over time. For sleep, this perspective is especially reassuring. It reminds us that rest is not a problem to be solved once and for all. It is a rhythm to be supported gently, night after night. Herbal remedies that have endured did so because they fit into that rhythm without demanding attention or control. As you listen, you are participating in this continuity. You're not required to master every detail. Simply understanding that calm has been cultivated this way for a very long time can be enough. The body recognizes familiarity. It responds to patterns that feel safe and predictable. In the next section, we'll explore how modern science continues to retrace these old paths, often confirming what experience suggested long before explanations existed. One of the most important qualities of sleep-supporting herbs is also one of the most misunderstood. Many of them work slowly. They do not announce themselves with immediate dramatic changes. Instead, they influence the body in small ways that accumulate over time. This slowness is not a flaw. It is often the reason they fit so well with natural sleep. Sleep itself is not an on-off switch. It emerges gradually as alertness fades and safety signals increase. The nervous system needs time to shift from readiness to rest. Herbs that act slowly tend to support this process rather than interrupt it. They nudge the body toward balance instead of pushing it into an artificial state. Early herbal traditions noticed this pattern clearly. A plant that produced instant heaviness without restoring sleep was viewed with caution. In contrast, remedies that worked best after repeated use, improving ease of falling asleep, reducing nighttime waking, or creating a calmer evening mood, were valued. These effects were subtle enough to feel natural and predictable. Modern research offers insight into why this happens. Many herbs associated with calm and sleep influence regulatory systems rather than endpoints. They may reduce stress hormone signaling, support parasympathetic nervous system activity, or gently adjust neurotransmitter balance. These systems do not change instantly. They respond over hours, days, or even weeks. This gradual action can feel almost invisible at first. People may not notice a single dramatic moment when the herb kicks in. Instead, they notice that evenings feel less tense. Thoughts slow sooner. Sleep arrives with less effort. These changes are easy to overlook, but they are often more sustainable than sudden sedation. Slowness also creates safety. When effects build gradually, the body has time to adapt. If something feels off, it can be adjusted or stopped before causing significant disruption. This was especially important in traditional settings, where remedies were used repeatedly rather than occasionally. Gentle accumulation reduced risk. For sleep, slow action aligns well with routine. Taking the same tea each evening, inhaling a familiar scent, or following a repeated pattern trains the nervous system to anticipate rest. The herb becomes part of a signal rather than a solution. Over time, the body begins to respond to the entire context, not just the plant itself. This understanding can reduce frustration. If you expect immediate results, slow remedies may feel ineffective. But if you think in terms of rhythm rather than reaction, their value becomes clearer. Sleep improves not because something forces it to happen, but because fewer obstacles remain. As you continue listening, let this idea settle comfortably. You do not need quick change tonight. The body knows how to slow down when given consistent, gentle cues. In the next section, we'll look at how many sleep herbs work not by creating drowsiness, but by reducing the signals that keep the mind and body awake. Many people approach sleep remedies with a single expectation: to be made unconscious. But most herbs associated with sleep do not work that way. They do not knock you out. They do not overpower the mind. Instead, they reduce the signals that keep the body alert, allowing sleep to arrive on its own. This distinction is important. Unconsciousness is not the same as sleep. Restorative sleep involves coordinated changes across the nervous system, hormones, muscles, and breathing. When the brain is forced into silence, those processes can become fragmented. Early herbal traditions noticed this without needing modern language. Remedies that created heaviness without rest were quietly abandoned. Herbs that endured tended to work upstream. They eased restlessness. They softened tension. They reduced the sense of urgency in thoughts. As these signals faded, the body naturally shifted toward rest. Sleep became a response rather than an imposed state. Modern neuroscience supports this observation. Many calming herbs influence pathways related to anxiety, stress response, and nervous system balance. They may gently enhance inhibitory signaling or reduce excessive stimulation. The result is not sedation, but readiness. The brain becomes less resistant to sleep rather than more suppressed. This is why herbal sleep support often feels subtle. There may be no dramatic moment when drowsiness appears. Instead, you notice that the urge to stay awake fades. Thoughts lose their sharp edges. Muscles relax slightly. Breathing becomes slower without effort. These changes signal that the body is transitioning naturally. This approach has advantages. When sleep is allowed to emerge rather than forced, it tends to be smoother and more continuous. People may wake less often, dreams may feel less intense, morning grogginess is often reduced. These outcomes align with the goal of rest, not just unconsciousness. Understanding this also reduces pressure. There is no need to wait for a strong sensation. If you feel only a gentle softening, that may be enough. Sleep does not require a push. It requires permission. As you listen, notice whether your own experience matches this pattern. Perhaps nothing dramatic is happening. That is often a good sign. The body may already be responding by letting go of effort. In the next section, we'll look at one of the most familiar sleep-supporting plants and explore how its effects illustrate this gentle, invitational approach to rest. Chamomile is one of the most familiar plants associated with sleep, and its familiarity is part of its strength. It appears in kitchens, teacups, and evening routines across many cultures, yet its effect is often misunderstood. Chamomile does not act like a sedative. It does not force the brain into sleep. Instead, it supports what can be called sleep readiness. Certain compounds in chamomile interact gently with receptors involved in relaxation and nervous system signaling. These interactions are mild. They do not shut down mental activity or overwhelm awareness. Rather, they reduce the background noise that keeps the body alert. The result is a smoother transition from wakefulness into rest. This explains why chamomile is often described as subtle. People who expect a strong sensation may feel disappointed. But those who pay attention to timing and context often notice something different. Falling asleep feels easier. The edge of anxiety softens. Nighttime awakenings may become less frequent. These changes are not dramatic, but they are meaningful. Chamomile's effectiveness is also closely tied to ritual. A warm cup in the evening signals a shift in pace. The act of preparing it slows movement. The aroma becomes familiar. Over time, the body begins to associate these cues with rest. The plant becomes part of a larger message that says it is safe to let go. This combination of chemistry and routine is important. Chamomile's compounds alone are gentle. When paired with warmth, dim light and quiet, their effect is amplified without becoming intrusive. This mirrors how many traditional practices worked. The remedy was never just the herb, it was the environment surrounding it. Modern studies reflect this pattern. Research suggests that chamomile may improve sleep quality more than sleep duration. People may not sleep longer, but they often sleep more smoothly. This aligns with the idea of readiness rather than force. The body is not pushed into deeper sleep. It is allowed to remain there once it arrives. Another reason chamomile has endured is its safety profile when used appropriately. This made it suitable for repeated use across ages and situations. That reliability reinforced trust. People did not need to evaluate it each night. It became a quiet constant. As you listen, you may notice how well this fits the broader theme. Effective sleep support often feels like an absence of struggle rather than the presence of sensation. Chamomile does not announce itself. It steps back and lets the body do what it already knows how to do. In the next section, we'll look at how ritual and repetition themselves shape the brain's response to sleep, and why herbs often work best when they are part of something familiar rather than something new. When it comes to sleep, the brain pays close attention to patterns. Repetition teaches it what to expect. This is why rituals matter, and why herbs often work best when they are woven into something familiar, rather than introduced as isolated solutions. The chemistry of a plant is only part of the story. The context in which it is used shapes how the body responds. Ritual creates predictability. Preparing a tea at the same time each evening, sitting in the same place, lowering the lights, moving more slowly. These actions send signals to the nervous system that activity is ending and recovery is beginning. When an herb is consistently paired with these signals, the brain begins to associate its presence with safety and rest. This process is not imagined, it is biological. The brain learns through repetition. Neural pathways strengthen when experiences occur together again and again. Over time, the body may begin to relax even before the herb has any direct chemical effect. The ritual itself becomes calming, and the plant quietly reinforces that response. Early herbal traditions understood this intuitively. Remedies were rarely taken at random moments. They were part of routines tied to evening, darkness, warmth, and quiet. These conditions mattered. A calming herb taken in a noisy, brightly lit environment would not feel the same as the same herb taken in stillness. The body reads the entire situation, not just the substance. Modern sleep science echoes this understanding. Consistent pre-sleep routines are one of the strongest non-pharmaceutical predictors of good sleep. They lower physiological arousal and reduce uncertainty. When the brain knows what comes next, it does not need to stay alert. Herbs fit naturally into this process because they offer a gentle, repeatable signal rather than a disruptive one. This also explains why trying many new remedies at once can backfire. Novelty increases alertness. The brain becomes curious rather than calm. A familiar ritual, even with a mild herb, often works better than a stronger intervention introduced suddenly. Sleep responds to reassurance more than intensity. As you listen, consider how this applies right now. The act of listening itself may be part of a ritual. The familiar voice, the steady pacing, the predictable structure. These elements work together to tell the nervous system that nothing urgent is required. Herbs used for sleep are most effective when they join this message rather than compete with it. They do not need to be impressive, they need to be consistent. In the next section, we'll explore another plant that supports sleep in a different way, not through ritual or aroma, but by gently influencing how long it takes the body to cross from wakefulness into rest. Valerian is often mentioned when people talk about difficulty falling asleep, and its reputation reflects a specific kind of support. Rather than improving sleep depth or duration, Valerian appears to influence how easily the body transitions from wakefulness into rest. For some people, it shortens the time it takes to fall asleep, especially when the mind feels too active at night. What makes Valerian interesting is how gradual its effects can be. Many people do not notice an immediate change the first night they use it. Instead, the influence seems to build over repeated use. This aligns with what we know about its chemistry. Valerian contains a complex mixture of compounds that interact with calming signaling pathways in the nervous system, rather than acting as a direct sedative. Valerian also challenges expectations because of its scent. It has a strong, earthy smell that some find unpleasant. This contrast between scent and effect is a useful reminder. Potency is not reflected by fragrance or taste. What matters is interaction. Even when the experience feels subtle, real changes may be happening beneath awareness. Traditional use of valerian often emphasized consistency. It was taken nightly for a period of time rather than as a one-time solution. This approach allowed the nervous system to adjust gradually. Sleep became easier not because something forced it, but because resistance decreased. Modern studies reflect this variability. Some people respond clearly, others notice little change. This is not unusual for sleep-related support. Sleep is influenced by stress, routine, light exposure, and expectation. Valerian works best when it is part of a stable evening pattern, rather than a response to occasional restlessness. Another important aspect of valerian is dose sensitivity. Small to moderate amounts may support relaxation and sleep onset. Larger amounts can feel stimulating or uncomfortable for some people. This reinforces earlier themes. Natural does not mean gentle, and more is not better. As you listen, you may notice how this fits into the broader picture. Valerian does not promise immediate results. It offers gradual support, aligned with routine and patience. For people whose main challenge is quieting the transition into sleep, that support can be enough. In the next section, we'll look at a different form of herbal influence, one that bypasses digestion entirely and reaches the brain through the fastest sensory pathway available. Lavender influences the body in a way that is different from many other sleep-supporting herbs. It does not need to be swallowed. It does not need to pass through digestion or circulation. Its primary route is much faster. Scent. When aromatic molecules from lavender are inhaled, they travel directly from the nose to regions of the brain involved in emotion, memory, and stress regulation. This pathway bypasses many of the filters that slow other forms of intervention. The result is often immediate, not dramatic, but noticeable. The edges of tension soften, breathing becomes easier, mental urgency decreases. This direct access explains why lavender has been studied in situations where calm is needed quickly, such as during stressful tasks or medical procedures. The effect is not sedation. People remain alert and aware. What changes is the background level of stress. The nervous system shifts toward a calmer state without being shut down. For sleep, this makes lavender especially useful in the moments just before rest. When the body's already tired but the mind is still active, scent can provide a gentle nudge. It tells the brain that the environment is safe, that nothing urgent is happening. Over time, repeated exposure can strengthen this association. Lavender also illustrates how personal response matters. Smell is closely linked to memory. If a scent is associated with comfort, the body may relax quickly. If it carries neutral or unpleasant associations, the effect may be weaker or absent. This variability does not mean the plant is ineffective. It means perception is part of the mechanism. Traditional practices often use lavender in ways that emphasize continuity rather than intensity. Small sachets, pillows, or evening rituals allowed the scent to be present without overwhelming the senses. The goal was a steady background signal, not a strong impression. Modern research supports this approach. Lower concentrations tend to be more effective for relaxation than stronger ones. Too much aroma can become stimulating rather than calming. Again, dose and context matter. As you listen, notice how this aligns with what helps sleep arrive naturally. Subtle signals repeated over time often work better than strong interventions applied suddenly. Lavender does not demand attention. It works best when it fades into the background, quietly shaping the nervous system's response to night. In the next section, we'll explore another gentle herb that supports calm by easing mental agitation rather than altering consciousness, often used when restlessness feels emotional rather than physical. Lemon balm has long been associated with calm, and its role in sleep support is closely tied to the mind rather than the body. It does not sedate. It does not create heaviness. Instead, it gently reduces mental agitation, making it easier for thoughts to slow down at the end of the day. This quality made lemon balm especially valuable in situations where restlessness came from worry, emotional tension, or overstimulation. Traditional use often focused on easing nervous energy rather than inducing sleep directly. When the mind became quieter, sleep followed naturally. Modern studies reflect this pattern. Lemon balm appears to influence pathways involved in stress response and emotional regulation. These effects are mild but meaningful. People often describe feeling more settled rather than sleepy. This distinction matters. A calm mind is more receptive to sleep than a tired body trapped in alertness. Lemon balm is also notable for its versatility. It can be used as a tea, an extract, or an aromatic preparation. Each form influences timing and intensity slightly, but the underlying effect remains the same. The plant supports balance rather than pushing in a single direction. In care settings, lemon balm has even been explored for easing agitation in people with cognitive decline, where sedation is undesirable. This highlights its gentle nature. It aims to create a quieter internal environment without dulling awareness. That same quality can be useful for anyone whose thoughts feel too active at night. For sleep, lemon balm often works best when paired with routine. Taken consistently in the evening, it becomes part of a signal that the day is ending. The body learns to associate its presence with slowing down. Over time, this association can be as important as the chemistry itself. As you listen, you may recognize this experience. When mental noise decreases, sleep feels closer. The body does not need to be forced into rest. It simply follows the mind's lead. In the next section, we'll look at another plant that supports calm in a slightly different way. One that has been studied for improving sleep quality rather than speed, helping the night feel more continuous and less fragmented. Passion flower is often discussed in the context of anxiety, but its relationship with sleep is more subtle than simply helping someone fall asleep. What makes passion flower interesting is its apparent influence on sleep quality rather than speed. For some people, it does not dramatically shorten the time it takes to drift off. Instead, it helps the night feel smoother and more continuous once sleep has begun. Traditional use of passion flower focused on calming an unsettled nervous system. It was used when tension felt internal and persistent, when the body could rest but the mind remained on alert. Rather than dulling awareness, passion flower appears to soften excessive signaling in pathways related to worry and over-arousal. This creates a mental environment where sleep can unfold without interruption. Modern research reflects this gentle profile. Passion flower has been studied for its ability to reduce anxiety without impairing clarity. In some settings, it has been explored as a way to calm people before medical procedures while keeping them mentally present. That balance is important. It suggests that the plant supports relaxation without clouding consciousness. For sleep, this translates into fewer nighttime disturbances for some users. Dreams may feel less intense. Awakenings may be shorter or less frequent. The night feels less fragmented. These changes can be difficult to measure with a stopwatch, but they are often felt clearly by the person experiencing them. Passion flower also illustrates how expectation shapes perception. If someone is waiting to feel heavy or drowsy, they may miss its effect entirely. Its support is quiet. It works in the background, lowering internal noise rather than announcing its presence. When sleep improves, it often feels as though nothing special happened, which is often a sign that the support was well matched. As with other herbs, context matters. Passion flower tends to work best when taken in calm conditions, as part of a consistent evening pattern. It does not override stress created by light, noise, or irregular schedules. It simply reduces resistance when the environment is already supportive. As you continue listening, notice how this theme keeps returning. Effective sleep support often feels like subtraction rather than addition. Less tension, fewer interruptions, a quieter internal landscape. In the next section, we'll step back slightly and look at how combining gentle herbs can create a smoother overall effect than relying on a single plant alone. In many traditional practices, sleep support did not rely on a single plant. Instead, gentle herbs were often combined to create a balanced effect. This approach is known as synergy, not because the plants become stronger together, but because they support different aspects of the same process. One herb might ease mental agitation, another might relax the body slightly, a third might support overall nervous system balance. None of them needs to act forcefully. Together, they create a smoother transition into rest than any single ingredient alone. This layered support reflects how sleep actually works. Multiple systems shift at once. Synergy also reduces the need for high doses. When herbs complement one another, smaller amounts are often sufficient. This lowers the risk of unwanted effects and keeps the experience gentle. Traditional formulas were rarely about intensity. They were about harmony. Modern research sometimes struggles to study synergy because it introduces complexity. It is easier to test one compound than several interacting ones. But lived experience often values blends precisely because they feel more natural and less disruptive. The goal is not a dramatic sensation, it is a quiet night. For sleep, synergy often means combining mental calm with physical ease and emotional safety. When these elements align, the body does not resist rest, it slips into it. As you listen, notice how this mirrors life outside medicine. Balance is rarely achieved through one action alone. It emerges when many small supports work together. In the next section, we'll explore how the way herbs are prepared, as teas, tinctures, or other forms, can change their timing and effect, even when the plant itself stays the same. The form an herb takes can shape its effect as much as the plant itself. A tea, a tincture, and a capsule are not simply different containers. Each one changes how quickly the body receives the plant's chemistry, how long the effect lasts, and which systems are influenced first. Understanding this helps explain why the same herb can feel different from one evening to the next. Teas are often the gentlest form. Warm water extracts lighter, water-soluble compounds and delivers them slowly. The act of drinking also matters. Sipping a warm liquid encourages slower breathing and relaxed posture. This makes teas especially well suited for the evening, when the goal is gradual unwinding rather than immediate change. For many sleep herbs, the tea itself becomes part of the calming ritual. Tinctures behave differently. Alcohol extracts compounds that water cannot reach, including certain oils and resins. This can create a broader chemical profile. Tinctures are also absorbed more quickly, especially when held briefly in the mouth before swallowing. This faster onset can be helpful for people whose restlessness peaks right before bed. At the same time, the increased potency means that smaller amounts are often sufficient. Capsules introduce another layer of timing. They must dissolve before releasing their contents, which delays absorption. This slower release can be useful when a steadier, longer-lasting effect is desired. Capsules also remove taste and aroma, which some people prefer. However, they eliminate the sensory cues that contribute to relaxation, making them feel more neutral. None of these forms is inherently better. They serve different purposes. The key is matching form to need. Evening calm often responds best to gentle, predictable delivery. Sudden intensity can be counterproductive for sleep. As you listen, consider how timing influences your own experience of rest. Small differences in preparation can quietly change how the body responds. In the next section, we'll look more closely at how timing itself, not just form, plays a role in whether herbal support feels helpful or disruptive at night. When it comes to sleep, timing is often as important as what is used. The same herb taken at different moments can produce very different effects. This is not because the plant changes, but because the body's internal state changes throughout the day. Herbal support interacts with those shifting rhythms. In the evening, the body naturally begins to reduce alertness. Stress hormones decline, body temperature slowly drops. Melatonin production increases as light fades. Herbs that support calm tend to work best when they align with this natural progression. Taken too early, they may feel dulling. Taken too late, they may not have time to integrate before sleep arrives. Traditional practices often reflected this awareness. Evening herbs were taken after the day's activity ended, not during it. This separation reinforced the body's sense of transition. Work was over, rest was approaching. The timing itself became part of the message. Modern research confirms that the nervous system is more receptive to calming signals at night. The same intervention that feels barely noticeable during the day may feel more effective in the evening. This is one reason why many people report that mild herbs work better at bedtime than stronger ones taken earlier. Timing also interacts with routine. Taking an herb at a consistent time each night trains the body to anticipate rest. Over time, the nervous system begins to respond before the herb's chemistry even takes effect. This anticipatory response reduces effort and increases reliability. Understanding timing can prevent disappointment. If an herb feels ineffective, it may not be the plant that is mismatched. It may be the moment. Small adjustments, taking it earlier or later or pairing it with quiet activities, can change the experience significantly. As you listen, notice how the evening itself carries cues. the slowing pace, the dimming light, the quieter sounds. Herbal support works best when it joins these cues rather than trying to replace them. In the next section, we'll explore how the way plants are harvested and dried can subtly change their effects, even before they ever reach a cup or bottle. Once a plant is harvested, its chemistry does not stop moving. Inside the leaves, flowers, and roots, enzymes continue working for a short time. Compounds shift, combine, or break down as moisture leaves the tissue. This means that the moment a plant is gathered is not the end of its development, but the beginning of a quiet transformation. Traditional herbal practices paid close attention to this. Harvest timing mattered. A plant collected before flowering could behave differently from one gathered after. Leaves picked in the morning might carry a different balance of compounds than those picked later in the day. These details were noticed not through analysis but through experience. The effects felt different. Drying, in particular, plays a significant role. If a plant dries too quickly with high heat, delicate compounds can be lost. If it dries too slowly, enzymes may continue altering chemistry in unwanted ways, or spoilage can occur. Airflow, darkness, and temperature all influence what survives the process. This is why the same species can feel gentler or stronger depending on how it was handled. For sleep-supporting herbs, these differences can matter. Compounds that contribute to calm are often volatile and sensitive. Preserving them requires care. Traditional systems often favoured shaded, well-ventilated drying for calming plants, protecting the qualities that support rest rather than agitation. Modern science now measures these changes, confirming that drying methods alter chemical profiles in meaningful ways. What once seemed like intuition is now visible in data. The plant remains the same species, but its character shifts subtly based on treatment. This understanding adds depth to the idea of consistency. An herb that feels helpful one time and different another time may not be unreliable. It may simply come from a different harvest or a drying process. Recognizing this reduces frustration and encourages gentle adjustment rather than force. As you listen, let this idea soften expectations. Herbal support is not static. It reflects living material shaped by time, care, and environment. When those factors align, the result often feels smoother and more predictable. In the next section, we'll look at how storage continues this process quietly, and why light, heat, and air can reshape herbal effects long after drying is complete. Even after a plant has been harvested and dried, its chemistry continues to change quietly over time. Storage becomes part of the remedy, shaping how much of the original plant's character remains when it is finally used. Light, heat, air, and moisture all influence this slow transformation. Delicate compounds, especially those that contribute to calm and aroma, are often sensitive to light and oxygen. When herbs are stored in clear containers or warm places, these compounds can break down gradually. The herb may still look fine, it may still smell familiar, yet its effect can feel weaker or different. This change is subtle and easy to miss. Traditional storage practices reflected this awareness. Herbs were kept in dark containers, cool cupboards, or wrapped carefully to reduce exposure. These methods were not symbolic. They were practical responses to observed change. Over time, people learned that careful storage preserved both effectiveness and predictability. Modern packaging sometimes prioritizes convenience or appearance over protection. This can lead to inconsistency. Two products labeled the same may feel very different, because one has been better preserved than the other. Understanding this helps explain why personal experiences with herbs can vary so widely. For sleep-supporting plants, consistency matters. A remedy that feels supportive one night and ineffective another can create uncertainty, which itself disrupts rest. Stable storage helps reduce this variability, allowing the body to recognize familiar signals more easily. As you listen, notice how this idea fits into the broader theme. Herbal medicine is not only about choosing the right plant, It is about maintaining the conditions that allow that plant to offer what it contains. Care continues long after harvest. In the next section, we'll explore why individual responses to herbs differ so much, and how personal biology plays a role in whether a plant feels calming, neutral, or uncomfortable. One of the most consistent truths about sleep and about herbal support is that no single approach works the same way for everyone. Two people can use the same herb, prepared in the same way, and have very different experiences. This variability is not a failure of the remedy. It is a reflection of human biology. Bodies differ in metabolism, nervous system sensitivity, hormone patterns, and stress history. These differences shape how plant compounds are absorbed, processed, and interpreted by the brain. What feels gently calming to one person may feel barely noticeable to another. In some cases, it may even feel stimulating. These responses are not wrong, they are personal. Traditional practices accepted this naturally. Herbal support was often adjusted based on age, temperament, workload, and season. There was no expectation that a plant would affect everyone identically. Instead, attention was paid to how a person felt over time. Adjustments were made slowly and with respect. Modern science now explains some of this variability. Genetic differences influence enzymes that process compounds. Gut microbes alter how substances are transformed. Stress levels change nervous system responsiveness. Sleep itself is shaped by many interacting factors, including light exposure, routine, and emotional state. Herbs interact with all of these layers. This understanding can be reassuring. If something does not work for you, it does not mean you are doing it wrong. It may simply mean that your body responds differently. Gentle adjustment, changing dose, timing, or form often matters more than persistence. For sleep, this perspective reduces pressure. There is no ideal response to chase. The goal is not to feel a specific sensation, but to support conditions where rest becomes easier. That outcome may look different from one person to the next. As you listen, allow yourself to remain curious rather than evaluative. You do not need to decide whether something is working tonight. Simply notice how your body feels over time. In the next section, we'll look at how belief and expectation influence herbal effects, and why the placebo question is more subtle than it first appears. Whenever herbal remedies are discussed, the idea of placebo often appears. It is usually framed as a challenge, as if belief alone explains why something feels helpful, but the reality is more nuanced. Expectation does influence experience, yet that does not mean the underlying chemistry is irrelevant. Both can be true at the same time. The human brain is deeply involved in how the body responds to any intervention. When you expect calm, the nervous system may begin to soften even before a substance takes effect. This response is not imaginary. It is physiological. Heart rate changes, muscle tension decreases, stress signaling shifts. These effects are measurable. Herbal traditions have long included ritual, intention, and repetition. These elements naturally engage expectation. Preparing a tea, inhaling a familiar scent, or following a bedtime routine all signal safety to the brain. That signal alone can reduce alertness. When an herb is added to that context, the effect can be amplified. Modern research tries to separate chemistry from expectation, but the separation is never complete. The mind and body are not independent systems. For mild conditions like everyday restlessness or difficulty sleeping, perception plays a larger role. This does not diminish herbal remedies. It explains why they work best within supportive routines rather than as isolated tools. Understanding placebo gently removes judgment. If something helps you relax, the mechanism does not need to be pure to be real. Relief is still relief. Sleep is still sleep. The body does not ask how an effect began. It responds to the state that results. This perspective also encourages humility. No remedy works in a vacuum. Context shapes outcome. For sleep, this is especially true. The environment, the timing, the ritual, and the expectation all interact with the herb's chemistry. When these elements align, the result often feels effortless. As you listen, you may notice that the calm you feel does not come from a single source. It comes from many small signals working together. That is not weakness, it is how the nervous system is designed. In the next section, we'll explore how some herbs influence sleep indirectly by interacting with the gut and its microbial community, shaping calm slowly from within. Not all calming effects begin in the brain. Some begin much lower, in the digestive system, where a large portion of the nervous system quietly operates. The gut and the brain are in constant communication, linked by nerves, hormones, and chemical messengers. This connection helps explain why some herbs influence sleep slowly and indirectly, without obvious immediate effects. The gut contains its own network of neurons, sometimes called the enteric nervous system. It responds to what we eat, how fast digestion occurs, and how comfortable or irritated the internal environment feels. When digestion is unsettled, the brain often stays alert. When digestion is calm, the brain receives signals that it is safe to relax. Certain herbs support sleep by easing digestive tension or supporting a healthier gut environment. They may reduce mild inflammation, calm spasms, or interact with gut microbes that produce calming compounds. These changes take time. They do not announce themselves with a sensation. Instead, they show up as evenings that feel easier and nights that feel less fragmented. Gut microbes play a particularly interesting role. Some microbes help produce substances that influence mood and nervous system balance. When herbal compounds interact with these microbes, the effect can be delayed but meaningful. This helps explain why some people notice better sleep after several days of consistent use, rather than after a single dose. Traditional practices often notice this connection without naming it. Herbs used for calm were frequently the same ones used to ease digestion. Evening meals were kept simple. Heavy foods were avoided at night. These habits reduced internal noise, making it easier for the body to rest. Modern science now studies this gut-brain relationship directly. Research shows that digestive comfort influences stress response and sleep quality. While herbs are not a cure-all, their gentle support of internal balance can remove subtle barriers to rest. As you listen, notice how sleep rarely depends on one system alone. When the body feels settled from the inside out, the mind has less reason to remain alert. Rest becomes a natural response rather than a goal to achieve. In the next section, we'll return to the idea of sleep as a process rather than a switch, and explore why many herbal effects feel like gradual shifts instead of clear on-off changes. It is common to think of sleep as something that either happens or does not, awake or asleep, on or off. But the body does not experience sleep this way. Sleep is a gradual process, marked by many small changes that accumulate over time. Understanding this helps explain why herbal support often feels like a slow shift rather than a clear trigger. As evening approaches, alertness begins to soften. Muscle tension decreases, breathing slows slightly. Attention becomes less focused. These changes do not happen all at once. They overlap and reinforce one another. Sleep arrives when enough of them align. Herbs that support rest tend to work within this gradual system. They influence early stages of slowing rather than the final moment of sleep. This is why their effects can feel subtle. They are active before sleep is obvious. By the time you notice rest, the work has already been done quietly. This perspective also explains why waiting for a dramatic sensation can be counterproductive. If you are monitoring yourself closely for signs of sleepiness, the mind remains alert. Herbal support works best when attention is light, when you allow the process to unfold without evaluation. Traditional evening practices supported this naturally. Low light, quiet activities, and predictable routines created a steady descent into rest. Herbs fit into this descent, not as a push, but as a guide. They marked the beginning of the transition rather than the end. Modern sleep science reflects this view. Effective sleep support focuses on reducing arousal and reinforcing circadian timing. It does not attempt to force unconsciousness. The body knows how to sleep when interference is reduced. As you listen, you may notice that nothing special is happening. That is often a sign that the system is working as intended. When the mind stops searching for sleep, the conditions for sleep improve. In the next section, we'll widen the lens and look at how these patterns appear across nature, revealing that chemical signaling for rest is not unique to humans. Sleep and rest are not uniquely human experiences. Across the natural world, living systems rely on chemical signals to shift between activity and recovery. Plants, animals, and even simple organisms respond to internal and external cues that tell them when to slow down. These patterns appear again and again, shaped by evolution and survival. In animals, chemical messengers help regulate cycles of wakefulness and rest. Hormones rise and fall with light and darkness. Nervous systems adjust sensitivity based on safety and energy availability. These shifts are rarely abrupt. They unfold gradually, guided by signals rather than commands. When conditions are right, rest emerges naturally. Plants also follow rhythms, even though they do not sleep in the way animals do. Their chemistry changes with time of day. Some compounds are produced more heavily at night, others during daylight. These shifts help plants conserve energy, protect themselves, or prepare for growth. The same chemistry that supports a plant's rhythm can interact with an animal's nervous system when consumed. This overlap helps explain why certain plant compounds influence calm and rest in humans. It is not coincidence, it is alignment. Living systems evolved in shared environments, responding to the same cycles of light, temperature, and scarcity. Chemical signaling became a universal language for slowing down. Herbal remedies tap into this shared language. They do not introduce something foreign. They amplify signals the body already understands. This is why their effects often feel familiar rather than intrusive. The body recognizes the message. As you listen, notice how this perspective widens the experience. Rest is not a personal failure or achievement. It is part of a larger pattern that connects many forms of life. When you slow down, you're participating in something ancient and widespread. In the next section, we'll continue to expand this view by looking at how humans and plants shaped each other over long periods of coexistence, quietly influencing one another's biology. Humans and plants have shared the same environments for as long as our species has existed. We have eaten them, lived among them, depended on them for shelter, medicine, and survival. Over this long coexistence, subtle biological relationships formed. Our bodies adapted to recognize plant compounds not as strangers, but as familiar signals within a shared ecological system. This does not mean that plants evolved for us, or that humans evolved for plants in a simple way. Instead, it reflects parallel adaptation. Plants developed chemistry to survive in their environments. Humans developed physiology that could tolerate, process, and sometimes benefit from that chemistry. Over thousands of years, certain interactions proved stable and useful enough to persist. For sleep and calm, these shared patterns are especially clear. Humans evolved as diurnal creatures, active during daylight and resting at night. Plants in the same environments also follow daily rhythms. Their chemistry shifts with light, temperature, and stress. When humans consumed or used these plants in the evening, the signals often aligned with the body's natural slowing. This long exposure shaped familiarity. The nervous system learned over generations which chemical cues tended to accompany safety, nourishment, and rest. While modern life has changed many external conditions, the internal biology remains largely the same. The body still responds to signals that once marked the end of the day. Traditional practices preserved this relationship intuitively. Evening herbs were often those associated with cooling, softening, or quieting effects. Daytime herbs tended to support alertness or digestion. These distinctions reflected lived experience rather than theory. People noticed how different plants felt at different times, and they adjusted accordingly. Modern science now studies these interactions through pharmacology and chronobiology. Researchers examine how plant compounds interact with circadian systems and stress pathways. In many cases, they find that timing and context are just as important as the compound itself. This reinforces what long coexistence already suggested. As you listen, consider how natural it feels to turn toward calm at night. The desire to rest is not something you need to create. It is already there, supported by deep biological memory. Herbal remedies that align with this memory do not feel foreign. They feel like reminders. In the next section, we'll explore how different cultures, often without contact with one another, discovered remarkably similar calming plants, and what that reveals about shared human biology. Across the world, people discovered calming plants independently. In regions separated by oceans and centuries, different cultures turned to different species, yet the effects they sought were remarkably similar. Leaves brewed into evening teas, roots used to quiet restlessness, flowers valued for their soothing scent. This pattern suggests that the discoveries were guided less by tradition and more by shared human biology. When people in distant places face the same challenge, difficulty resting after a demanding day, they often notice the same kinds of signals. Which plants reduce tension? Which ones ease the mind without dulling it? Which feel safe to use regularly? Over time, these observations converge, even when the plants themselves are different. This convergence is important. It shows that herbal sleep support is not purely cultural storytelling. It reflects consistent physiological responses. Different plants can influence similar pathways related to stress, relaxation, and nervous system balance. The names change, the preparation changes, the goal remains the same. Traditional systems around the world often emphasized evening calm rather than forced sleep. They valued gentle transition. This shared emphasis hints at something fundamental. Human nervous systems respond better to gradual slowing than to abrupt shutdown. Cultures learned this not through theory, but through experience. Modern research sometimes retraces these independent discoveries, finding overlapping effects among unrelated plants. This does not mean all calming herbs are interchangeable. It means they speak a similar biological language. They reduce excess alertness. They create space for rest. As you listen, notice how reassuring this is. You're not relying on a single traditional belief. You are part of a broader human pattern. Rest has always been approached gently, across many places and times. In the next section, we'll look at how some communities became centres of preservation for this knowledge, carrying it forward through periods of instability and change. During long periods of social change and instability, much practical knowledge about plants and healing could easily have been lost. Yet in many regions, it was quietly preserved. One of the places where this preservation happened most consistently was in monasteries and similar communal centres devoted to routine, study, and care. These communities were not laboratories in the modern sense, but they were places of observation. Gardens were carefully tended, plants were grown, harvested, dried, and used with attention. Records were kept, not always as scientific data, but as notes, calendars, and practical instructions. What worked was remembered. What caused harm was avoided. Sleep and calm were especially important in these settings. Daily life followed regular rhythms, waking, working, resting, and sleeping at consistent times. Herbal remedies were used to support these rhythms rather than disrupt them. Evening preparations were mild. They were meant to settle the body after prayer or labour, not to overpower it. This environment allowed subtle effects to be noticed. When routines are stable, small changes stand out. A tea that improved rest became part of the evening pattern. A plant that disturbed sleep was quietly removed. Over time, these choices refined the knowledge further, making it more reliable. What's important here is not the setting itself, but what it provided: continuity. Knowledge could be tested across years instead of days. observations could accumulate without interruption. This stability mirrors what sleep itself requires: regularity, predictability, and gentle transitions. Modern medicine often overlooks this kind of slow refinement, but it played a significant role in shaping what we now consider traditional herbal use. The remedies that survived were those that fit well into structured lives without causing disruption. As you listen, notice how much this aligns with your own experience of rest. Sleep improves when life follows a steady rhythm. Herbal support that respects rhythm rather than intensity tends to endure. In the next section, we'll widen the view once more and look at indigenous knowledge systems, which mapped plant effects through close long-term relationships with specific landscapes. Indigenous knowledge systems developed through close, long-term relationships with specific landscapes. People lived among the same plants generation after generation, observing not only their effects on the body, but how those effects changed with season, weather, and preparation. This created a detailed, place-based understanding that functioned much like a scientific map, even without written formulas. For sleep and calm, this knowledge emphasized balance rather than intervention. Plants were chosen based on how they fit into daily life, not how strongly they acted. Evening remedies were often cooling, grounding, or soothing, reflecting the natural slowing of the environment at night. This alignment reduced conflict between the body and its surroundings. Indigenous practices also recognized limits. Certain plants were used only occasionally. Others were avoided during pregnancy or illness. These boundaries came from experience, not fear. They reflected respect for the power of living chemistry and an understanding that support works best when it is measured. What makes this knowledge particularly valuable is its depth. It was tested across many lifetimes in the same ecological context. When a plant consistently supported rest without causing harm, that information became embedded in daily practice. When it did not, it was adjusted or abandoned. Modern science increasingly turns to these knowledge systems for guidance, not as folklore, but as starting points for research. The goal is not to replace traditional understanding, but to learn from its long-term observations. In many cases, laboratory findings confirm what indigenous practices already suggested, that gentle, context-aware use produces the most reliable outcomes. As you listen, notice how this perspective shifts the idea of expertise. Knowing how to rest has always been part of survival. It did not require specialization, it required attention. In the next section, we'll bring this wide view back toward the present and consider how safety, moderation, and awareness remain essential when using herbs today. As herbal remedies continue to be used today, the core principles that shaped their long history remain relevant. Safety, moderation, and awareness are not modern additions. They were always part of effective practice. What has changed is the context in which herbs are used. Modern life introduces variables that did not exist in the past. Medications, supplements, altered sleep schedules, artificial light, and constant stimulation all influence how the body responds. An herb that felt gentle in a quieter environment may interact differently when combined with other substances or taken during periods of high stress. This does not make herbal remedies unsafe by default. It simply means they require the same attention they always have. Knowing when to use something, when to pause, and when to adjust remains essential. Traditional practices emphasize this through routine and restraint. Modern use benefits from the same mindset. Sleep-supporting herbs, in particular, work best when they complement healthy conditions rather than compensate for their absence. They cannot replace darkness, quiet, or rest. They can only support the body when those foundations are present. Expecting more than that often leads to disappointment. Awareness also means recognizing when something is no longer needed. If sleep improves, there is no requirement to continue using the same support indefinitely. Herbal remedies were often used seasonally or situationally, not continuously. This flexibility preserved their effectiveness and reduced dependence. As you listen, allow this idea to feel reassuring rather than restrictive. You're not being asked to manage every detail. Simply knowing that gentle support works best within gentle conditions is enough. In the next section, we'll shift back toward the body, inviting attention to physical sensations that signal the transition into rest, and how letting effort go allows sleep to arrive naturally. As the day comes to an end, the body often signals its readiness for rest long before the mind fully notices. Muscles begin to soften, breathing slows slightly. The weight of the body feels more settled against whatever supports it. These signals are easy to overlook, especially when attention remains focused on thoughts rather than sensation. Returning to the body means allowing these signals to be noticed without analysis. There is no need to change posture or breathing. Simply noticing warmth, contact, and stillness is enough. The nervous system responds to this kind of attention by reducing effort. Alertness begins to fade naturally. Herbal support fits quietly into this process. When the body feels supported from within, sensations of tension often decrease. The shift may be subtle, but it creates space. Sleep does not require instruction. It responds to conditions that feel safe and predictable. Traditional evening practices often emphasize this bodily awareness without naming it. Sitting quietly, washing hands, drinking something warm. These actions redirected attention away from thinking and back toward physical experience. The body was given permission to slow down first, allowing the mind to follow. Modern sleep science confirms that physical relaxation often precedes mental quiet. When the body feels at ease, the brain reduces vigilance. This sequence cannot be reversed by force. It happens best when attention is gentle and unhurried. As you listen, you may notice small signs of settling. A deeper exhale, a slight heaviness in the limbs, a sense that holding effort is no longer necessary. These are not things to pursue. They arrive on their own when allowed. In the next section, we'll explore why letting go of effort, rather than trying to fall asleep, often makes the difference between restlessness and rest. Sleep does not respond well to effort. The more it is chased, the more alert the mind becomes. This is not a personal failing. It is how the nervous system works. Effort signals importance. Importance signals vigilance. Vigilance keeps the body awake. Letting effort go does not mean giving up. It means removing unnecessary pressure. There is nothing you need to achieve tonight. Sleep is not a task. It is a state the body enters when conditions allow. When effort fades, the conditions improve. Herbal support aligns with this principle when used gently. The purpose is not to force a result, but to reduce resistance. When the body senses less urgency, less expectation, it begins to slow on its own. The mind follows. Traditional practices supported this naturally. Evening routines were simple and repetitive. There was no evaluation of whether sleep would be good or bad. The night was allowed to unfold. This absence of judgment reduced mental activity, making rest more likely. Modern sleep research echoes this understanding. People who stop trying to sleep often sleep better. Attention shifts away from outcomes and toward experience. The nervous system relaxes when it no longer feels observed or tested. As you listen, notice whether effort is still present. If it is, there is no need to remove it deliberately. Simply noticing it is enough. Awareness itself softens control. In the next section, we'll reinforce this sense of continuity, reminding you that rest is already in motion and that nothing new needs to happen for sleep to arrive. Rest does not begin at a single moment. It is already unfolding long before sleep becomes obvious. The body has been slowing in small ways throughout the evening. Signals of activity have been fading. Muscles have been releasing tension. Breathing has been finding a steadier rhythm. Nothing sudden is required for this process to continue. Calm continuity means recognizing that there is no gap to cross. You are not waiting to enter rest. You're already within it, moving gradually toward deeper stillness. Sleep is simply one expression of that movement, not a separate destination. Herbal support, routines, and quiet attention all work by reinforcing what is already happening. They do not introduce something new, they remove interruptions. When interruptions fade, continuity becomes clear. Traditional practices often reflected this understanding. Nights were not treated as challenges to overcome, they were treated as extensions of the day's rhythm, naturally quieter and slower. Rest was assumed, not demanded. This assumption reduced resistance. As you listen, notice how little effort is required to remain here. Thoughts may come and go, sensations may shift. None of that disrupts the underlying movement toward rest. Calm continues beneath it all. In the next section, we'll gently prepare for closure by returning to where we began, allowing the ideas of plant support, patience, and natural rhythm to settle without needing to be remembered. As the night deepens, there is nothing more to understand and nothing to apply. The ideas you've heard do not need to be held in mind. They can fade naturally, the way background sounds fade when attention drifts elsewhere. Knowledge has already done its work simply by being present. Herbal remedies, routines, and quiet environments all point to the same principle. Rest is not created, it is revealed when interference softens. When the body senses safety and predictability, it continues doing what it already knows how to do. At this point, even listening can become less important. Words may blur slightly, pauses may feel longer. This is not something to notice or correct. It is simply the nervous system shifting towards stillness. There is no wrong direction to move in now. If thoughts appear, they can pass without engagement. If sensations change, they can be allowed. Nothing needs to settle completely for sleep to arrive. Partial calm is enough. Imperfect quiet is enough. The night does not ask for effort. It offers continuity. You're already part of that flow. In the final section, we'll return briefly to the opening idea, not to explain it, but to let it close the circle gently. At the beginning, we spoke about how humans once looked to the natural world for calm, long before sleep was studied or measured. Plants offered gentle support not because they promised results, but because they fit naturally into the rhythm of evening and rest. That rhythm has not changed. The body still responds to gradual slowing. The nervous system still prefers invitation over force. Calm still grows when conditions allow it to continue without interruption. There's nothing more to do now. The process is already underway, whether you're aware of it or not. Rest does not need attention. It arrives on its own time. Everything flows. Sleep in that motion,